All right, well, hey, my name is Adam. I'm the lead pastor here, so if it's your first time, we are really grateful you chose to spend part of your weekend here with us. So I told the tech team this. I'm going to screw it up. I'm going to say it wrong, and you're going to think that I'm a horrible human. But, some weeks I feel like I pray, and we plan, and I decide what we're going to talk about, and then I do it, and it's it's good, and I feel like God was in it. But then there's other weeks where God kind of interrupts me. And so for this series, we're doing this series that's called The King's Men, and we're talking about David's mighty men. It's this list of mighty warriors that David had that he wrote down at the end of his life. And me and Jonathan actually had sat down and planned this series months ago. And I wrote it, and I have this Microsoft Word document, and then I save it, and I don't look at it for a while, and then I open it back up. And I remember this guy's name being on the list. And when I opened it back up, I was mad, because I'm like, why is that there? Why did we pick, who decided this? Jonathan, this has to be your fault. Why would we pick this guy? It must have been, and I was going to talk to him about it, hey, remind me of our conversation, because this can't possibly be, why would I want to talk about this guy? But then, I specifically remember, 2 weeks ago, opening that up and just feeling like, now I know why. So, my idea for this series was going to be one of those manly men, rah, rah, let's go get them. This sermon can be a little different. So, the guy I want to look at, he's overshadowed. His story kind of becomes a side story in someone else's story. He's not the main character of his own story. I would even argue he's not even the secondary. He's third place, maybe even fourth if you read the whole story. He's barely important, but he's really important. So what I want to do today, I want to zoom in on this guy. I really want to look at who he was, what he did, and find the deep lesson in his life. Tell you what. Hold on, let me see if I can get it to work. My remote decided to bug out. All right, you follow me? Cool. 2 Samuel 23:39. Uriah the Hittite. Uriah the Hittite. Now, church people. Got my church people here? The church people. I say Uriah, you know who I'm talking about, right? You got the story downloaded. You already kind of know what that story is. And what I want to ask you to do, if you know this story, if I say Uriah and you're like, oh yeah, that story, I just want to ask, can you take what you know about this story and just kind of put it to the side for a minute? Because here's what I want to do. Uriah's story is not told from Uriah's perspective in the Bible. Uriah's story is told from someone else's perspective. So what I want to do is I want to try to take the chapter where his story takes place and just look at it from Uriah's perspective. So only going to talk about the things that Uriah knew. Only going to look at things from what he saw, what he heard, rather than having the other story come in and kind of overshadow his story. Okay, so just push all that stuff that you know about Uriah off to the side. If you don't know who Uriah is, you're going to do better than they are. So this is good for you. You're I don't know who that guy is. Perfect. Let me give you a little bit of background on him. So Uriah, the first thing you need to know about him is that he's a warrior. He's on this list of David's mighty men, which means he's elite. He's top 40 warriors on the list. Now, he's the last guy on this list, but so what? This is an amazing list to be on. So he's powerful, bad dude in Israel. The second thing you need to know about Uriah is that he's not an Israelite, and that should be obvious as well. He's Uriah the Hittite, not Uriah the Israelite. So he's a foreigner living with the Israelites. So one of the things that I like to think about it, and it might not be true, but I like to think that because he's not native born to Israel, the way we would say it is he didn't grow up in church. You know what I'm saying? Specifically church 3,000 years ago, but he didn't grow up in the Israelite religious system. He maybe grew up not knowing the one true God. So he was kind of on the outside looking in and came to faith later. So I don't know. I just always imagine Uriah could go to our church. This would be a kind of church that Uriah would like. And we'd all feel safer for him being here because he's a scary dude. And the last thing you need to know about Uriah is that he is married to a stunner. Okay, his wife is gorgeous. Even from a distance, she is strikingly beautiful. And if you've never heard the story, you're that's a strangely specific detail. Yep, but we know it. Even from a distance, she's really, really attractive. So good job, Uriah. His story is recorded in 2 Samuel chapter 11, but again, we're going to skip most of the story to go through it the first time because I really want to look at it through the eyes of Uriah, okay? So chapter 1 of 2 Samuel starts in, hold off on that for a second, starts in the springtime. Now this is back when nations went to war in the springtime. Okay, so they wouldn't go to war in the winter because you could lose your whole army just because it's cold outside. So they'd wait until spring. So it's spring and they start to rally the troops to get ready to go out to war. And since Uriah is one of the toughest dudes in Israel, he's getting the call up to go to battle. And I want you to kind of imagine what that last morning would have been like as he's getting ready to go to war. Can you imagine what it would be like waking up that morning? And like, I don't know, I have this feeling, I mean, it's total speculation. We're not going to base any of our life off of this, but I feel like him and his beautiful wife probably fought that morning. Doesn't that kind of fit? Like, he couldn't find his helmet or something, and like, he's like, you always move my stuff, and she's, they're going back and forth all mad, but they're not really mad about that. They're both anxious and frustrated, and they're looking to the fact that he's about to leave, so they're arguing maybe about that, and then, they put it down, and they hug each other, and then he leaves, and he goes to war. Now, again, keep in mind, he's not like getting on a helicopter going somewhere, like he has to walk everywhere. It's a slow process. So the army gets and they mobilize and they get to wherever it is they're going, and they're kicking butt. They're routing everybody they go up against. And I just imagine that one night he's sitting down around a campfire with some of his boys, and they're just kind of, I don't know, sharing stories from the battle of the past weeks, reminiscing, maybe talking about home a little bit because they've been gone a while. And maybe Uriah's like staring into the fire, missing his wife. And all of a sudden, out of the shadows into the campfire light, the general of the army walks up, breaks their nice little camaraderie they're having. And he tells Uriah, hey, the king wants you to go home. The king is requesting your presence. So pack your gear and go. And then he leaves. And don't you imagine like his buddies being like, ooh, big time, get to go see the king, like all kind of razz him a little bit. So he's thinking, that's weird. Why would the king want to see me? Like, I'm one of the best warriors. Like, I'm worth 10 guys. Like, if you want a messenger, pick that guy. Don't pick me. Like, I'm all right. At the same time, he also sees that it's an honor. He loves his king. He fights for his king. He's willing to do anything for his king. So he gets his gear together and he heads home. And when he gets there, he goes straight to the palace to report to the king. In verse 7, we see what happens. When Uriah came to him, the king asked him how Joab was, how the soldiers were doing, and how the war was going. So the king just wants an update, like mission report, Uriah, go, and he just wants to hear how everything's going. So they kind of go back and forth. Who knows how long the conversation is, but they're having this conversation about the war. And then verse 8, the king said to Uriah, go down to your house and wash your feet. So Uriah left the palace, and a gift from the king was sent after him. Now, I just want to point out, if you're not like super familiar with the Bible, like that's like go down and wash your feet. That's a weird thing for one dude to say to another dude, right? I just want to point that out. Like, so back then, that was kind of the same as saying, hey, why don't you go like shower up? Kind of the same kind of thing. But it carried a little bit more than that. He's telling him like, go home and settle in. Like, hey, go say hi to your wife. You know what I'm saying? Like, go say hi to your wife. Like sit in front of the fireplace. Turn some Netflix on and chill. Or is it Disney Plus and chill now? Is that the thing? Maybe that's wrong. Is that wrong? Never mind. You figure that out amongst yourselves. That might be wrong. Childhood, never mind. Anyways. So Uriah sent out of the palace, and the king even sends a gift after him. Isn't that weird? That's like, I don't know, bottle of wine, Boys to Men CD. I don't know. Like, that's what it sounds like, doesn't it? And Uriah walks out the palace doors. Maybe the palace doors close behind him, and he's like, that was kind of weird. And he starts, and he lives not very far away. Like maybe half a football field away. And maybe he can even see his roof. And he walks out and he hesitates. And look what verse 9 says he does. He slept at the entrance to the palace with all his master's servants and did not go down to his house. What? Why? Why wouldn't he go home? I mean, he's home. That's one reason to go home. It's right there. Number 2, the king said to, like, hey, dude, Go home. I'm even going to send a gift. Go home. Like, why would he choose to do, like anybody would just do it, right? A normal person would go home. But he doesn't. So what is Uriah thinking now? He sleeps here all night. The king actually has the same question. So verse 10, the king says, haven't you just come home from a military campaign? Why didn't you go home? Dude, don't you like miss home in like every way you can possibly miss home? Why didn't you go home? And Uriah actually gives like a crazy answer in verse 11. Uriah said to the king, the ark in Israel and Judah are staying in tents, and my commander Joab and my Lord's men are camped in the open country. How could I go to my house to eat and drink and make love to my wife? As surely as you live, I would not do such a thing. Wow. So Uriah says, I'm not going to go home on principle. I actually have like this code I'm living by, and because of that code, I'm not going to go where honestly I want to go. That's a crazy thing, isn't it? Now, see, we're in this series, this King's Men series, and we've noticed that all of these mighty men are living by some kind of a principle, right? They don't just do what they want. They don't just do what they feel, even though they could. Uriah could have went home. Nobody would have said a word to him. Nobody would have said a word to him. But he chose to live according to higher principles. He chose to live his life in sacrifice to his God, his king, and his country. And he does something that like makes no sense to a normal person looking at that. You look at that and go, what? Why not, dude? But again, you see this pattern all throughout with these mighty men. Week 1, when we looked at Eleazar, he stood his ground when an army was bearing down on him and everybody else ran away. He chose to do something that a normal person would go, what? Why wouldn't you run, dude? Last week we looked at Benaiah. He did a bunch of stuff that didn't make sense, but the most notable was the fact that he chased a lion down to a pit in the snow. Like, it made no sense. A normal person looks at that and goes, that's crazy. And here we have Uriah coming home after being gone for presumably months, and he chooses to not go home and be with his wife. Because he's saying, hey, I live my life according to a set of principles, and I'm not going to bend to those, even though I really want to, even though I feel different, even though everything in me points to breaking this. No, I'm going to live the way I feel called to live. And again, I just have this pre-built-in assumption that when you read something like that, part of you goes, that's weird, but part of you goes, man, I like whatever the 2019 version of these principles are. I want that. I want to live my life according to what God wants me to do and like make these kind of decisions. Like I'm assuming that you're drawn to that like you want that. Because man, I do too. The problem is I get into those actual, like right now I want it. But when I get down into the details, that's when I look at that and go like, man, if I was him, I'd go home. See you in a minute, honey. Like that would be, we wouldn't be, even a discussion in the moment, but that's the problem. You have to decide ahead of time that once you get to those moments that you're still going to live according to those principles. Now, just imagine him saying this to the king. King's going to feel that one, right? Because I don't know if you noticed, the king's not at war. So like the king's going to feel this a little bit. And I don't know, again, this is all speculation. I don't know what Uriah was doing when he said this to the king and how the king looked. I imagine the king maybe raised his eyebrows a little bit. Maybe a flash of frustration went over his face. And Uriah's like, that's weird. Why would he be mad at me for that? But then he just keeps going. So the king responds in verse 12. Then the king said to him, stay here one more day and tomorrow I'll send you back. So Uriah remained in Jerusalem that day and the next. At the king's invitation, he ate and drank with him, and the king made him get drunk. But in the evening, Uriah went out to sleep on his mat among his master's servants. He did not go home. So the king requests that he stays one more night. The king and him have some kind of drinking party. The king seems to be the catalyst here to pushing it too far. He keeps handing him drinks, and Uriah's like, no, but he's the king, so he just keeps taking drinks. And even drunk, he doesn't stumble home. He keeps his code. That's crazy, isn't it? It's a little side note about alcohol. I don't know, like, didn't that tell you maybe that alcohol doesn't really create anything new in you? It just kind of reveals what's already there. Isn't that fascinating that like, well, we found out about Uriah is that he lives by a code. And it doesn't matter if you get him drunk, he's just going to do what he was going to do. It doesn't really change anything for him. And by the way, again, he could have. And here he could have went home. He already could have, and now he's got even more an excuse. He could have said, man, I was drunk. It could have been an excuse, right? Do you do that? Like use a circumstance as an excuse to do something that you have decided ahead of time you weren't going to do. Do you ever do that? And it's probably not drunk. You're not in college anymore. Well, maybe you are, but hopefully you're past that, right? We don't say like, I was drunk as an excuse to do something stupid. We don't do that anymore, do we? This is Mosaic, so it's a possibility. Okay, don't do that. But it's probably not, right? It's probably, I was just, I'm stressed out right now, or I'm under a lot of pressure right now, or I was tired, I was hungry, whatever. You use some kind of circumstance as an excuse to do something that you decided that you didn't want to do that thing, or you were going to do that thing and you didn't do it. You allow circumstance to change your decision making. But man, if you look at all these mighty men, they didn't allow that to happen. They never allowed circumstance to change the decisions they were going to make. And what I want you to see is like, these are the guys who make an impact in the world. The ones who decide that they're going to live by principle, that they're going to do things that make no sense to anybody else. They're the ones who leave a dent. They're the ones whose names get written down, and the world is different for having had them in it. And if you want to have that, if you want to leave a legacy, if you want to do something that matters with your life, you're going to have to decide, I'm going to live this way. No matter what comes at me, I'm going to do this, period. Circumstances don't get to have an effect on the way I'm deciding to live my life. I'm going to live my life to honor God no matter what. That's what these guys did. So, King's done with Uriah. He sends him back out to war, but before he leaves, he hands him a letter to give to the general. So he takes the letter and he heads out. I'm assuming it was sealed in some way. Would have been super tempting to peek, wouldn't it? Like you have this letter from the king to the general. I would have really liked to like kind of, do some kind of trick to get it open and then seal it back up. It was that way when I found it. But he doesn't. Kind of guarantee that he doesn't. He gets back, hands the letter to Joab, and maybe he goes back to the, similar campfire situation that night. He's finding his boys, like, how's it been going? They're giving him a hard time, like, how's the king's house? Like, everybody kind of gets back into that rhythm. And then again, the general comes in and interrupts this camaraderie and says, Uriah, tomorrow, you're leading the attack against the toughest part of the city. And then he walks back away. That'll, ruin a fun night, right? Everybody's kind of looking at him like, welcome back to the battle. And I don't know, can you imagine what that would be like? You couldn't help but have a little bit of fear, even if you're a brave, tough dude. You couldn't help but have a little fear kind of grip your heart a little bit. But again, Uriah lives by principle. He sets his jaw. Yes, sir. I signed up for this. I signed up to live or to die for my God, my king, and my country. But I wonder what his prayers were like that night. Praying, maybe he regrets not going to see his wife. Like, man, I would have liked to see her one last time, Or maybe a bunch of prayers like, Lord, please let me live tomorrow. I don't want to die. I don't want to miss my wife. I don't want to have this be the end of my story. So he wakes up the next morning, he gets his orders, and the specific orders that he gets make no sense. He's ordered to go dangerously close to the enemy city walls. And I wonder what that was like. There had to be an internal struggle there, right? Doesn't Joab, Mr. General, know that if we go this close, we're going to be in range of the bowmen? We're going to get shot at. Doesn't he know that? But again, because he lives by principle, he doesn't question it. Maybe he knows something I don't. We're going to do this anyway. So he straps on his sword and he goes out and he fights valiantly in this battle. And if you stop right here and you say, you know what? If we just guess what happens based off of all the other king's men, you look at this situation that the odds are stacked against him. There's going to be arrows flying. He's fighting the fiercest part of the battle. You look at the other mighty men, you're like, he's going to do it. Something awesome is going to happen, right? Uriah's going to break through the line. Somebody's going to climb up onto the roof and kill all the bowmen. It's going to be this crazy awesome story, right? That's what it seems like is going to happen. If you base it off of how all the other king's men lived and how they fought, this is going to be an awesome story. But he doesn't. He charges, he fights, and I don't know, there's an archer up on that, gets a line on him. Boromir, dead. 3 of you got that. He dies. Right there, on the battlefield. That's it. Doesn't that just seem wrong? Like, unjust, unfair? Like, that's not how it should go. Where's it's this guy who lives this life of integrity, this life of sacrifice. Like, he does, from our perspective, everything right. And he's dead on the battlefield. That's it. Where's the happy ending? It seems wrong. And by the way, like, that's just from Uriah's perspective, right? Just based off of what I just told you, that seems like that's not how that story's supposed to end. But it's worse than that. See, we know details that Uriah didn't know. We can fill in some of the blanks that Uriah was unaware of, right? We know why some of the stuff in the story didn't really make sense. So if I may back up to the beginning and tell you the full story. While Uriah went out to war, this king wandered up onto his rooftop and was out one night, and he looked down into Uriah's backyard and saw Uriah's strikingly beautiful wife bathing from his roof. And the king, who could have had any girl in the nation, decided he wanted to take Uriah's wife and sleep with her. Now, we don't know the specifics of the story. We don't know if Uriah's wife was a willing participant or if the king forced himself on her. We can only speculate. No matter what, it's a crappy situation for her, right? The power dynamics are extreme. Either she's flattered or she's intimidated. Either way, it's not good for her. And she turns up pregnant. Again, Uriah's out fighting, bleeding, roughing it. And the king knows that this military campaign is going to last way too long to pawn this off like it's Uriah's kid. So he calls him home. That's why he calls Uriah, of all people, home. And obviously the king is highly motivated for Uriah to go home and sleep with his wife, which is why he does all that weird stuff. He even gets him drunk, hoping that'll do the trick. But Uriah is more godly drunk than the king is sober. So the king is frustrated, the king is afraid, and his last stupid act was to write an order to the general, put Uriah in the dangerous part of the battle and make sure he does not come home. Seals it and hands it to Uriah to take to Joab. And that's why he gets the order the next day to go fight too close to the wall. He carries his own death sentence back to the battle lines. Unfair. Unjust. Wrong. And the worst part is the king's name, who I have specifically avoided saying this entire time. You probably know it. It's David. This is King David who did this. The guy whose list he's on. He is one of the mighty men of David. The guy who Uriah sacrificed, served, honored, died for. He died for his king. He is one of the king's most trusted warriors. And he's betrayed by that man. What do we do with that? See, that's the thing I want to ask you today. What do you do in your life with stories that don't make sense? Because you don't have this exact story, right? But you have some things, some pieces of your life that you go, that doesn't make sense. This doesn't fit with the way I view the world, with the way I view God. Like, I don't get it. It's senseless. It's unjust. I don't understand. What do you do with those pieces of your story that just don't make sense? Because if I'm writing Uriah's story, he gets to live a good long life. He gets to go home, make babies with his wife, gets to be a grandpa and put his grandkids on his knee, and he gets to die somewhere in honor. Instead, he dies on a battlefield with arrows sticking out of his chest way before any of that. What do you do with these kind of stories? Do you have pieces of your life that don't make sense, that are unfair, unjust, don't add up? So, I have to continue the story to make sense of it, if that makes sense. The moment Uriah takes an arrow to the chest and drops to the ground, looking up to heaven, and he takes his last breath on this earth. The very next moment, Uriah opens up his eyes and takes his first breath in heaven, right? And none of us know what that's like. You know, you can read the Bible, and the Bible is purposely like kind of symbolic and vague about what that's going to be like. So anytime people are like, oh, I know exactly what it's going to be like. No, you don't. You have no idea. God set it up that way, so we wouldn't actually know fully what it's going to be like. We have some details, but we don't have all of them. So whatever, Uriah wakes up. I don't know what his first reaction would be like. Oh, okay. Strange. Doesn't hurt anymore, and there's no hole. I must be dead, right? So, and then what? What's the scene? The gates? The pearly gates, whatever that means, right? It's open. He walks up, peeks his head in, and he sees this sea of angels. And like the moment they see him, they just erupt in this like roar, like unlike any stadium on the earth, just roaring and cheering and excitement. And that's not the best part. That's pretty sweet, but that's not the best part. He looks and he sees the throne, the throne. And he hears the voice, and it says, Uriah, you lived a life of honor and sacrifice. Well done, good and faithful servant. Come and enter the joy of your master. And he gets to come in. And that moment right there is worth everything, by the way. I really feel like that moment's worth everything. He doesn't really need more than that. But here's the deal. I'm going to correct something maybe about the way you think about heaven. And most people hate it when I do that, so I'm just warning you. You might hate this. But I think a lot of people think, I at least have people say stuff to me like we assume that the moment you get to heaven, you just know everything. I don't know why, but like everybody just kind of says that, like, oh, I'll just know when I get to heaven. Maybe. Just so you know, like nowhere in the Bible does it say like the moment you open your eyes in heaven, you just like know all the things. Like all the questions you had are now answered the moment you open your eyes. Nowhere does the Bible say that. And as a matter of fact, if you're trying to like guess based off of some of the principles you find in the Bible, I would say that's guaranteed not to happen. God never works that way. It's not like the Matrix. He's not going to like plug something into the back of your head and like, now I know how to fly a helicopter. Like it's not going to happen that way, okay? That's not the way God works. He always works in process, in journey, and taking us along. I highly doubt you're just going to know everything. Now, the reason I'm telling you that right now is because I don't think Uriah knows yet. I don't think he knows. I mean, he knows he died, but he doesn't know why. So I don't know how this works. And I know some of y'all are going to be like, quote the verse, like, he will wipe every tear from our eyes. When? Because maybe before he wipes every tear from our eye in heaven, maybe something has to happen. Like maybe we have to like process it. And since time works different in heaven, who knows? Maybe it can take forever. It can take years. Maybe an angel took Uriah off to the side and said, hey, come here, man. I got to tell you something. And there's this party, and then I go off to the quiet corner, and Uriah's like putting his drink down, like, what's up? Yeah, I said that. So this is why he died. Can you imagine Uriah going, what now? That king that I died for, what? What did he do? And then see, what I think happens is you get this moment before the Creator where you actually get to go and stand before the throne, the king, the highest court and the highest kingdom. You get to stand there. And I think like maybe you get to process your life in front of him. I feel like this has to be the way it goes. And can you imagine Uriah coming up to God and being like, that's why I died? Can you imagine that conversation? Like how frustrated he would have had to been? Like, God, why would you? Your boy, David, he did that to me. Like, can you imagine the anger, the rage that would be coming off of this guy? Like, I served him. I carried my own death sentence. I love that guy. I died for that guy, and he murdered me, God. I imagine in that moment, Uriah, being the honorable soldier that he was, demanded that David pay for that. He deserves to die, God. He deserves to die. And maybe he just crumbled right there. And then, the best thing ever happens. The king steps off of his throne and comes down and talks to Uriah. And maybe puts his hand on his shoulder and he says, Uriah, he does deserve to die. He does. He's a murderer. He betrayed you. He deserves to die. But I'm going to take his place. I'm going to die for him. Matter of fact, I'm going to go to earth and I'm going to be betrayed just like you were. And I'm going to die. I'm going to be murdered just like you were. But I'm going to take David's sin onto me. Can you imagine that moment? I mean, Uriah being the soldier that he is, he would have been like, no, my king. Kings don't die for subjects. Subjects die for kings. That's why I'm here. Like, you don't do that. You don't step on the throne. You don't do that. And then maybe he tells him the whole plan. Maybe this is where he does get to know some stuff. Maybe he's like, no, it's actually better than this. I'm going to die for David's sin. And Uriah, by the way, I'm going to die for yours too, because we know you have them. And he tells the whole thing because he's going to die for your sin and my sin. He's the whole plan, the big plan, the massive plan that Uriah now sees. That Jesus is going to die for all the wrongs, for all the senseless things. He's going to take all of that onto himself. All the unjust, all the unfair things, all the evil. And maybe then, he bends down and he wipes his face and says, no more. And it's over. And he's free of this world and the stench of sin in this world. And he picks him up and he says, come now, enter the joy of your master. And let me read this to you. For us, this is the end of his story. And we can most truly say that he lived happily ever after. But for him, it was only the beginning of the real story. All his life and all his adventures on earth had only been the title and the cover page. Now, at last, he was at the beginning of chapter 1 of the great story, which no one on earth has read, which goes on forever, in which every chapter is better than the one before. Footnote, that's the end of the last book of the Chronicles of Narnia. I changed it a little bit to fit Uriah's story. Uriah's entire life, all the injustice, all the betrayal, all the murder, was just the title page of his story. The title page. And we are now, right here, sitting here 3,000 years later. He is 3,000 years into the real story of his life. God ushered him into chapter 1 the moment that arrow hit his chest. He didn't have a happy ending down here. Because it wasn't the end. That was the beginning. So can I share 3 things with you that we learned from Uriah? Number 1, there are some things in your life that will not make sense disconnected from eternity. Some will. You know, everybody, we always try to find meaning. We always try to find purpose behind the pain that you experience in your life. And you'll find some. You'll be like, oh my gosh, that's why God did that, and here it is, and boom, there it's like it's a perfect little bow gets put on some things. But other things are going to happen in your life, and you're going to ask why, and you're never going to get an answer. Not this side of heaven. You're not going to have justice this side of heaven. You're not going to be able to make sense of the senseless this side of heaven in some of the things that you experience in this life. So this is why I say to people all the time, don't look at the title page of your life and go, it doesn't make sense. Of course it doesn't. It's the title page. It's not supposed to make sense yet. He's not near done writing. Don't judge the author based off the title page. You wouldn't do that to a normal author. Don't do that to God. All the things that are happening in your life, you have to plug them into eternity for some of them to make sense. Like the arc of your story is not going to land the moment you die. It's going to go way past that. Don't assume that it's all supposed to make sense the moment you die. It's not. God has 1 billion years for it to make sense. 1 billion. So don't forget this, because you're gonna experience some really, really difficult things. And you're gonna have to plug them into eternity to make sense of them. Second thing I want you to know, and this is a crappy thing, but you're not promised a good life. You're not. If we learn anything from Uriah, just because you live the life that God wants you to live, you do what God wants you to do, you serve God, you live honorably, does not mean you'll have a good life. See, I think, I got another sermon to preach here. Just do it, man. I want to cuss. No, don't do that, Adam. God doesn't owe you crap. God doesn't owe you. And I think that's probably one of the most common things I run into is this sense of like, well, I did this and I made this decision. Like, come on, God. He doesn't. Nothing you can do can put the creator of all things in your debt. Nothing. And if you plug your life into eternity, it doesn't even matter. This is again my point. Like, God doesn't owe you because think about it. If you think about it from the perspective of if this life is just the title page and God's got a book this long that's just like the first day in heaven and you're just on the title page and you're going, God, this isn't fair. I lived better than this. God's like, dude, shut up. I got you on page 3 million. You're going to be good then. Okay, why are you getting all caught up on this title page? You're all bent out of shape because of it. God's not done. This sermon, see, we usually say, if you're not dead, God's not done. Guess what? In this sermon, when you're dead, he's still not done. It still keeps going. Again, plug your life into eternity. Good doesn't matter down here. It matters, but it doesn't. And the last thing I just want to say is make decisions based off of what you'll be proud of 3,000 years from now. That's how long it's been since Uriah chose to live an honorable, sacrificial life and took an arrow to the chest for it. I truly believe that if you could talk to Uriah today, he wouldn't change a thing in his story. He would live it exactly the way he did because he can see now, 3,000 years into the real story, that the title page just didn't matter that much. He's just happy that he lived the way God wanted him to. So I'm going to have Jonathan come up here and play us out. And so every Sunday, I pray. I walk around downtown Wadsworth like a weirdo. One time I had a guy chase me because he thought I was trying to rob the stores. I was just praying. And this morning I was praying about this message, and this is one of those gut check things for me, what I'm saying is, live for God, no matter what. Choose to say, I'm going to live for him whether my life is awesome or horrible. I'm going to choose to live for him whether I live another 50 years or another 50 minutes. That's essentially what I'm telling you. Just make the hard choice. Who cares if your life sucks? It doesn't matter that much. If you plug it into eternity, your life is a vapor, gone, and now you're into eternity. Who cares if it sucks? Just do what God says. Live the way God wants you to. It's worth it. That's what I'm saying. So what I'm praying because I have to internalize this first, right? I can't just tell you to do it. I have to pray it. I have to say, Lord, I want to live like that. So I want to say, Lord, I want to be a grandpa one day. I want what my dad has. Every Sunday he gets to see his grandkids come over and he gets to enjoy, seeing the fruit of a life well lived. I want that. I want my annoying children to grow up and for me to be able to spoil the grandkids and pay them back for all of what they're making me endure right now. I want that. I want to die a long time from now, having seen a lot of really cool stories. But I don't know if that's what I'll get. So I was praying Lord, I want that, but I want to say I'll serve you even if you don't give me that. I want to grow old with my wife. But they could have all died in a car wreck on the way here. Are you still going to serve him, Adam? Well, I want to say yes. And then I was walking across the street and I'm like, well, even if a car hits me right now, and this is it. Honestly, it sucks to be y'all. I get to start chapter 1. Whew. I can't wait to read the first sentence of that one. Like, I'm out. See ya. Lord, please be with my wife, my kids. But yeah, I'm good. But no matter what, I just wanted to say, God, I don't know what it's going to be like if you wreck me, if you let anything come into my life, if I have to live a life like Uriah. I want to say that no matter what, I'm going to do what you want me to do. I want to pour it out for you. That's what I want. And I hope at least in theory, you want that too. So I wanted to end by reading these verses to you. Some of the most important, powerful verses you'll see. Yet what we suffer now, and the title page, is nothing compared to the glory that he will reveal to us later. For all creation is waiting eagerly for the future day when God will reveal who his children really are. Against its will, all creation was subject to God's curse. But with eager hope, the creation looks forward to the day when it will join God's children in glorious freedom from death and decay. We know that all creation has been groaning as in the pains of childbirth right up to the present time. And we believers also groan, even though we have the Holy Spirit within us as a foretaste of a future glory, for we long for our bodies to be released from sin and suffering. We too wait with eager hope for the day when God will give us our full rights as adopted children, including the new bodies he has promised us. We were given this hope when we were saved, for if we already have something, we need to hope for it. But if we look forward to something we don't yet have, we must wait patiently and confidently. What Paul is saying here is that what is coming is so much better than what is. We just look forward to that. We live our entire life based off of that hope. And you base everything off of that. And you can face anything if you really grab a hold of that. Pray with me. Jesus, there's one part of me wants to pray Lord, I don't want any of us to have to live a life like Uriah did. I don't want to pray that on anybody sitting here. But Lord, I really, really, more than I want to not pray that, I want to pray that we would just live our life in sacrificial service to you no matter what comes. And I know just based off math that somebody's going to have a life close to that in here. I pray that they would press into you, Lord, that they would live a life leaning into you, that when they open their eyes in heaven, they'll see that it was all worth it. And that when the title page is done and when you put that period at the end of that title page, oh man, we get to start chapter 1, Lord. And I just pray we live for that chapter. Not for this page, but that chapter. Give us the strength and the boldness to live for that. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen.
So I want to sing this part. I don't know where you're at, but that message really hit me hard. There's just some stuff that sometimes I just shake my head and I'm like, God, what's going on here? You have to explain this to me. And then I'm reminded that God doesn't owe me anything. And maybe my purpose is just to say yes and obey God and just to trust that he is good no matter what. So I want to sing this bridge of greater things in the chorus, and I hope just for you that maybe this can be your opportunity to just agree with us, to agree with me, that it doesn't matter what's going on, that we won't fear, that we won't be lost, that we won't be hopeless because we put our hope in Jesus. Would you stand with me? Just want to fill this place right now with worship. Let's sing, I will not fear. I will not fear, for you are with me. will see this fight from the victory. Yes, we will. And no power of hell can stand against me. No, it won't. 'Cause I've seen this fight from the victory. Let's sing it one more time. And I will not fear, for you are with me. Oh, and I will see this fight from the victory. And no power of hell can stand against me. Oh, 'cause I've seen this fight from the victory. Let's sing that chorus. Oh, and you never fail, and you never will, and I'll trust your name for greater things, and you will come through, and you always do, and I'll trust your name for greater things, and you never fail, and you never will, and I'll trust your name for greater things, and you will come through, and you always, and I'll trust your for greater things, for greater things. Oh, I trust in you, Lord, for greater things. All of my anxiety, I trust in you for greater things. Doesn't matter what I'm going through, I'll trust in you for greater things.